Na 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 moonlight, na 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 in the sky, na 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 you say, na 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 popcorn, na 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 moonlight, na 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 in the sky, na 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 you say, na 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 popcorn.
The Last Dance series finale was last night. We got to learn about a lot of interesting things. Steve Kerr's history. I was surprised we got a Steve Kerr episode. We got to learn about horrible pizza incidents in Salt Lake City, which is almost as bad as their fan base. And, of course, the GOAT. Now, I did have my little issues with this. I'm going to allow you guys to kind of like share your thoughts on it. We'll kind of like get a little deeper breakdown on it. Orlando, what'd you think of the last night's episodes?
I mean, I'm a Jordan guy, so whatever you kind of put in front of me, I'm probably going to think they're pretty good. I've been in the middle of reading 11 Rings, and some of the stuff that Phil was kind of talking about in terms of, you know, the inside of the team, how it was operating. I think it was championship number 5. I thought they would give maybe Scottie a little bit more love because Jordan, you know, really talked about that season that, you know, Scottie was playing at a very high level and arguably could have won Finals MVP that year. But overall, I thought it was a great show. I loved watching Jordan go against Reggie Miller. I remember watching that series as a kid and, you know, just brought back those memories. Jordan was my childhood superhero. So these Sundays, I felt like I was a kid, you know, noon, 2 o'clock, watching Jordan play against, you know, the Knicks on NBC. You know, that's the type of vibe I was on. So I thought it was a great show.
What about you, Austin? How are you feeling about it?
Man, a lot of different emotions pretty much each episode. You know, I'm born in 1990, so I'm 29. I was about 7, 8 years old watching Jordan get Byron Russell, you know, crossed up, and his momentum was just bringing the energy, brought him the other direction. But I didn't really know too much as a 8-year-old kid as I do now. So watching every episode, and, you know, it was one thing to watch highlights, but it just doesn't do Michael justice because the dude was just a straight beast competitor. Honestly, my favorite part about last night's episode, though, was when Reggie Miller talked about him and he said, "You don't talk, you know, to me, call me Black Jesus." Like, who does that, bro? Like, I don't know. You got Lance Stevenson is blowing this in this LeBron's ears. Michael Jordan's telling people, "Call me Black Jesus." There's a little bit of a difference.
Now, Dre.
Big difference. Huge difference.
Now, Dre, you said that the Steve Kerr stuff kind of stuck with you a little bit more last night. Can you kind of tell us what you thought about? Like, I guess that would have been the first episode out of the 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of what made this whole documentary series so great is that there is so much to actually happen to these guys in real life. I think there's a lot of teams where, you know, they're really good teams. I think there's the potential to have a documentary on some of the LeBron teams and possibly the Golden State Warriors teams. But these guys all had so much of their own either issues or like personal battles that they were dealing with. And Steve Kerr, you know, one of his was losing his father in a really traumatic way. So I had no idea that had happened to him. I just knew Kerr was a good player on, you know, some of these Bulls teams, and then you hear about his father dying and just how hard Steve Kerr had to work to become basically good enough to the point where Michael Jordan, you know, the best player on the planet, is telling you, you know, one of the biggest series, most impactful series of their lives, that, hey, you better be ready because I know these guys are double teaming me. I know you're going to be open and I trust you enough to take that final shot, you know? And so that really stood out to me. And especially the moments where they were talking about Michael Jordan literally punched Steve Kerr in the face one time at practice, but it's like, hey, we had to move past that. I know that he was trying to make me better. And then by the end of, you know, where we got to, I started with being just this guy that got punched in the face by Mike to, hey, you're going to take this last shot for me because I know I'm getting double teamed. And we got to put this series into somebody else's hands and it's going to be you. And so just to see that development on top of, like I said, those personal struggles where you're dealing with your dad passing away, that to me just culminated in fantastic moments for Steve Kerr. And I was really happy for him by the end of the series.
To kind of piggyback on what you were saying about, you know, the internal stories or struggles that these guys had individually, you know, as a coach, you know, we try to tell these kids all the time, you know, you got to be out for one another and play for one another. And yeah, you know, out on the court, you got to all play as one, but off the court, you don't necessarily have to be their best friend, or you don't have to be running around in the same circles all the time for you guys to work together. And it's just kind of amazing how, especially that second three-peat, because Phil talked about it in the book and Jordan kind of talked about it, was how that second group, they had to learn a whole new set of guys and different set of egos to get them all to buy in as one. And, people don't realize how difficult it is to get all those personalities and traits to all come collective to buy into one goal. And I just found that fascinating with all the different distractions. They were still focused on one goal and they still held it down.
Now, Coach, I have an interesting question for you on that subject. Let's say you had a player who missed a practice to go on live television for a now defunct wrestling organization. How would you have handled that situation as a coach?
We made a lot of bread. Remember that.
It's funny. Before I read Phil's book, I'd probably be going ballistic. Granted, it's, the NBA Finals. But after reading Phil's book and understanding how he managed Dennis and how Phil Jackson as a player was kind of that type of person, free-spirited and all that stuff. He even talked about in the book how during the season they let him go to Vegas for like 2-3 days, or it was like 48 hours. And he obviously didn't come back after 48 hours. And I think Jordan went out to Vegas or somewhere and dragged him all the way to practice, like hungover and everything after his like little binge. And from that day forward, he was locked in, focused on the goal. And Jordan was just kind of like impressed at the fact that this guy can go party and do all this stuff, still come back here, still work his tail off. And all he cared about was winning. Phil knew his players. So
I get that, but man, that's crazy. That's just
Julian.
too much. Yeah.
My bad. I just wanted to ask y'all. I know he's the greatest and the most competitive, but did y'all notice like how big his whiskey glass he was drinking every episode?
Well,
oh yeah,
it was pointed out to me his yellow eyes too. So,
oh yeah, that too.
Kind of wonder, is that all just from just the years of cigars, whiskey, everything else in Michael Jordan's lifestyle? It's crazy that he could just be still such a badass despite all the other little vices that he had in between. Kind of tells you that those players of that era, completely different breed than like the players of today, because like I know LeBron will has his wine company and all that stuff too, but like if you told me LeBron was out partying on a Friday night, I wouldn't believe you. It just doesn't seem like something that would be in his nature or today's athlete's nature, aside from maybe like James Harden's proclivity to go to strip clubs in Houston. That's pretty much the most I really know.
There's a story. Someone sent it to me, but I was looking at the video today of Michael Jordan playing 36 holes of golf with Jeremy Roenick down in Coors Light all day, smoking cigars. Jeremy Roenick put a bet on Cleveland because he didn't think Jordan would be up to play. And Jordan said, we'll beat him by 20. And I promise you I'll have 40 something. And he had 40 something and they won by 25. And he was just like, how does a guy play 36 holes of golf, drink beer, smoke cigars, and dominate?
I mean, how does a guy put up close to 40 points while having food poisoning? And so not exactly a ringing endorsement for Salt Lake City pizza, exactly. Certainly if I make a trip out there, late night pizza is probably not going to be at my first top of the list priorities to get. Granted, I know if it's delivered by 5 guys,
exactly.
I'm probably going to, turn it down. I'm probably going to say, yeah, you keep this one on me.
That's the craziest part of the story to me, that his trainer said it. I saw him talking to Ernie Johnson on his podcast too, and he just said, yeah, the pizza guys came 5 deep. I guess they thought they were going to be Michael Jordan or something. It's like, if that's what you thought, come on, man, it's something fishy. And if there ain't no anchovies, they probably put something else in the pizza that's not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they even said it, right? Is everybody that was, with Jordan in the room at that point was like, nah, we're good. We're not going to have pizza because we don't trust it. But then they let, MJ, who has to play the next day, eat it all himself. I would have been like, hey, dude, I'll go drive to McDonald's or something and pick you up your own food. Don't eat that pizza when 5 dudes are dropping it off.
Mm-hmm. When you hear that story from that point of view, and obviously us now in 2020 hearing about, Russell Westbrook and the comments that the people out in Utah are saying, you're just sitting there saying damn, dude, that's how these people treat these guests that come to play. I get it, hostile environment. I understand you want your team to win, but damn, you got to do that to the other team's best player.
And Utah just seems like such a mild state, right? And it has all this history with basketball, poisoning the greatest of all time. That's some next level fanhood. But you know what? I'm okay with it still being called the flu game, because I'll say this. I don't know, the bad pizza game, it doesn't have that same ring. The food poisoning game, kind of a mouthful. Flu game, I'll stick with it. It's not historically accurate, but it's fine. Now, I'm still waiting for the LeBron James COVID-19 game. We'll see if that could officially help him supplant Jordan's legacy. It's going to be hard to do after, of course, just this documentary, which basically made a whole new sect of Michael Jordan fans. The thing I kind of like had my issues with on this one is I didn't feel like it was a complete documentary. And what I mean by that is I know it's built around the 98 Bulls season, but it's mostly supposed to be about Michael Jordan, the man, the myth, the legend, everything about him. I was kind of disappointed he didn't touch on his decision to return to play for the Wizards, or his later life and, you know, purchasing the Charlotte Bobcats, the Charlotte Hornets as well. I kind of wanted a little bit of that in there just because that is part of the whole Jordan experience. It is part of his life, a kind of disappointing part of his life. But nonetheless, if we're going to show this documentary, The Last Dance, to people in, 20 years to kind of explain Michael Jordan, they should know about the time when he came back to play for the Wizards. They should know about like what he's done so far to this point as a businessman, because that's what he wanted with this documentary, the complete encapsulation of his life.
I can see why you might want to see some of that. I honestly wanted to kind of see a little bit more point of view from like Phil. There were some details from the book that I just felt like the documentary didn't really touch on, or I feel like they didn't really talk too much about the actual season of The Last Dance, and it kind of just breezed through it. So I think that's kind of some of the stuff that they left out. I mean, yeah, maybe some of the Wizard stuff might be interesting to see, just him as a 40-year-old man bullying Kwame Brown or whatever. But, I just think I don't think that would really captivate the whole story of Michael Jordan. I think they did everything the right way.
I just think, the why would be kind of interesting. The why are you coming back to play for this like fledgling organization as the Wizards, if you're going to come back at all, would have been kind of like an interesting kind of thing to touch on, just because it's the ending of the documentary. Even if it's just like 10 minutes at the end, I feel like that would have been at least like a complete arc, because we saw him all the way from his rookie season, his college seasons, his high school seasons. It would have been nice to see that like end part, that final chapter, but that's just kind of how I felt about it. It's not a huge deal. It's still a top flight documentary, but not a complete documentary in my mind.
For me, I know exactly what you're saying. I just kind of think that this was a moment where, I know nobody might believe me, but Jordan felt a little threatened. So he had to release this documentary to remind everybody and enlighten the younger fans, who's the best player ever. And I think by putting in some stuff on the Wizards, time, even though he had a great couple seasons with them, it wasn't the elite Michael Jordan. So if he put that together with it, I think fans, especially with LeBron playing the way he is at 35 and, this year, they might be like, all right, LeBron was, but you know what I mean? So it's just, I don't think he showed any weakness in this documentary. And if they put the Wizards years, for him, in his mind, it would be kind of his weakest part of his career, even though he was older.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right, Austin. And I was even, scrolling through Facebook, and you see these different polls that ESPN puts out and Bleacher Report and all that stuff. And ESPN, I think, recently just asked a bunch of people like, hey, who would you rather have, Michael Jordan or LeBron as your teammate? Who is better offense, defense? Who has the better even shoes, right? The best brand of shoes, whose shoes perform better. And everybody now started to vote Michael Jordan in literally every category, right? They even had like, who's the better passer? And without a doubt, like, there's no way Michael Jordan is a better passer than LeBron James. Right. But still, everybody's like, 70% of people were like, oh yeah, Michael Jordan's a better passer. Michael Jordan was better on defense, which I agree. He's better on offense, like every category. And a lot of it, I think he was, right? Like shoes, I would say Jordan shoes are more iconic. But to be that swayed that LeBron James literally gets nothing over MJ in that poll, I think just shows you that, hey, this documentary really did help sort of boost Michael Jordan's recognition and sort of the aura surrounding Michael Jordan. He definitely benefited from cutting the documentary off where it ended.
No doubt. I mean, just growing up in that time, it was almost like, how can he come back? And, when he did come back with the Wizards, from my point of view, the team was filled with a bunch of young guys that weren't necessarily playing hard, and it was almost his way of kind of saying like, hey, I'm partial owner. I can come out and be old and still show you guys how to play. But obviously you could tell in that times, and if you were to move Jordan's mentality into now, I don't know if it will really translate with this young generation of kind of like in your face, tell it like it is. If you don't like it, there's a door.
Well, I'm going to ask you to give technically 2 ratings, right? So I'm going to ask for just the ratings on just last night's couple episodes and then the series as a whole. So once again, our rating system: strikeout, foul ball, base hit, warning track power, or home run for a 5-star rating there. Starting first, let's go with you, Austin.
For a whole, I'll give it a 5-star. I mean, every single episode, not trying to give out a couple of little random facts about me, I'm emotional, but I shed some tears. The greatness brought me to tears, yo. So just the fact that a documentary could do something like that spoke volumes to me. So I'm going to have to give it a 5.
How about you, Coach O?
I give it a 5. Like I said before, most things Jordan, I'm probably going to give it a 5. I definitely learned a little bit more stuff about him and the journey of the team, especially kind of the stuff in the early years, because I met Jordan when I was 7 years old, and I was born in 84. So that was around 90, 91, right when he was really hitting that championship phase. So I remember watching him play and doing these things, but I didn't know the background story and the triumph that he had to go through and the Pistons and how they beat him up and all that stuff. So it was kind of refreshing to kind of see that from that point of view, because when you're a kid, especially at that age, 7, 8 years old, you don't know anything about basketball, especially at my age and the basketball that I've been able to watch and learn. It was nice to see that as a 35-year-old man. So I give it a 5.
Okay, gotcha. So a couple of home runs there for the series as a whole. Did you feel that way about just episodes 9 and 10 respectively as well?
I think 9, I probably give it a 5, and I probably say 10, I give a 4.5.
Okay.
I kind of want a little bit more detail of that Pacer series, and I feel like they left some stuff out there.
Okay, Dre, how are you feeling? How about your ratings for these?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a home run to the episodes, and then I'm going to give a home run to the series as a whole. I do have a few, quips with the pacing of the story and the linearity of it. So they jump back and forth, I think, a lot in the storytelling between a lot of the episodes. But those to me are just minor things. And when we already talked about it, is the story just came together so well. The fact that, these guys experienced so much, and you got one of your players running off to Vegas or doing WrestleMania stuff. You've got Michael Jordan and Steve Kerr losing their father, Scottie Pippen being underpaid. All of this is just so crazy that it makes the perfect documentary, in my opinion. And I don't know if we'll ever see a team that's as, embattled and going through these issues, yet still achieve such greatness again in our lifetimes.
And as far as where I'm going to go with it, so considering that I gave last week's 7 and 8, which are still, I think, my 2 favorite episodes out of the entire series arc, I gave those home runs. I'm going to actually say that the episodes 9 and 10 themselves were warning track power for me, a 4-star rating, just because, they kind of did miss on a couple little things that I would like to have seen. Not necessary, but would have been nice to have seen in the documentary. As series as a whole, though, and I kind of said it, it's a home run. Out of here. Frankly, we needed it. It was important for the timing, considering COVID. We've seen a lot of really good documentaries right now. And just overall, just to expose Michael Jordan to a whole new generation of fans who didn't get a chance to really see him play. You guys talked about, born in the early 90s. So you got a little bit of Jordan and kind of for me, 94, mid-90s, it's kind of I got to see him in Space Jam. I got to see him as Jordan the Wizard, but didn't really get a chance to enjoy prime Michael Jordan. And just seeing his ability to switch hands on some of those layups, or the impressive dunks, or just the mentality, that minute-long clip of him just talking about what it takes to win, talking about wanting his teammates to win with him. If that doesn't get you up in the morning, if that doesn't spark some energy in you, some emotion to want to go out there and, get shit done, I don't know what it's going to take. But, if you don't want to play that way, don't play that way.